The kids.
Which kids? These kids? Sure. The leaders, yes.
Well, they have to be followers too. They have to be.
Sure.
They have to be accountable. Is this a foundation to build on?
You mean this class?
Any class that seems to put bleakness in there, hopelessness in there.
Can I tell you a story, Zoni? Good. You know, when I came to this country, I had zero money. We got food from the church. I worked as a janitor, graveyard shifts at gas stations. But like everyone else, life goes on and things change, and my life changed, hopefully for the better, I think. And I got some money. And I realized I have some talent for building things, like sheds and houses and those things. So I remember going to Home Depot, San Leandro, a few years ago, and I ordered maybe about $5,000–6,000 worth of lumber. I was very hopeful that I'm going to build this nice office space, build a bathroom, a shower. And there was so much excitement driving to Home Depot, and there is so much excitement just looking around and just getting things done and ordering them. And I was so excited for the delivery date, and ultimately they came. And I took everything downstairs, and then I began to cut and put things together. Every cut had so much hope in there. And then I realized that I really don't know how to square anything. I don't know how to build a shed. I don't know how many feet apart the studs need to be. I don't know much about drywall. I don't know how to build a shower. And all of a sudden I was confronted with the reality of my incompetence. Hope is really, really good. Hope is a place of privilege. America is a land of privilege. It's just that nobody is good at anything. You know, you can take classes for free. You can work at In-N-Out, make $20–30 an hour. You can do all sorts of things in America, filled with hope. But for your hope to eventually amount to anything, you need knowledge, you need information, and that's the tough part. You and I have some age on us, you know. I mean, I don't know what you've been through, but no life is exempt from struggle, disappointment, and no doubt you've had your own share. And whenever you're confronted with your past, and there is some pain involved in those memories, you always ask yourself why you were so foolish in doing certain things or rushing to certain things. Maybe you should have Googled, read some books, gained some information so that you could have protected your hopes and dreams. Relationships are wonderful to have, but in a disposable culture, I'm not quite sure how well that's going to go. Kids are wonderful to have, but in a culture filled with isolation and depression, I'm not really quite sure how successful that's going to be. You know, there is nothing wrong with hope and dreams. It's the right of every young person. The other thing I think that you may assume is that I actually have the power to make the kids in this classroom hopeless and depressed, which is not true. You know, there is a good amount of magic involved in two people coming together just at the right time. You know, it's like you go to a coffee shop, you sit, and across the room sits someone, and for some strange reason you're attracted to them. The only problem is it's just not the right time. You can invest a good amount of time, you can share stories, create stories, but the truth is you're moving away. Or maybe you're getting over your ex, maybe you were diagnosed with cancer. And so all of a sudden you realize, well, only if you had met this woman or this man or this pet 10 years ago, things would have been different. Attraction is not very difficult. investing and making that attraction into a bona fide relationship, that's a tough thing, because that requires investment. You fail to see the impact of technology on the human psyches in the 21st century. Everything is quick. No one has time to wait, to be patient. It doesn't work that way anymore. Maybe 50 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And there is nothing wrong with injecting some doses of reality into young people's minds. Nothing wrong with that. But your point is well taken. Carmen?
You talked about you don't know how we're all inherently or sleep depression.
For you to be able to make your life work, you need power. And you don't need to be outwardly aggressive, but you need to be ambitious. You know, every time you apply for a job and you're interviewed, there are 20 other people who are also waiting to be interviewed. And if you understand that, you understand the fact that you have to sell yourself, there's a good amount of aggression inside you that you try to dominate other people and their chances of getting the job without perhaps knowing all of this. You try very aggressively, again, without you knowing this, to make the committee like you. That's what competition does. It makes you aggressive. You have no choice but to be aggressive. I mean, look at the essays that you have to write. You do some research, you sit and you write. You have to compete with other desires. You have to demolish some other desires so you can continue writing. And just in case you get a C, you're not going to be mean-spirited. You're going to send me a very, very nice email asking if we can meet in the office, and we do. And then you say, well, how can I improve my grade? Well, you're competing against incompetence. Maybe I am incompetent grading your essay. But you can't survive without being aggressive. Now, some aggressions could be passive. Freud was born at a different time. Freud had seen World War I. Freud had seen parts of World War II. Freud had seen his father being pushed around. Freud had seen his siblings being gassed. Freud had seen the powers of a Nazi movement. Freud had seen the power of society. Freud was also an introvert. He was very, very, very sensitive. Freud also worked in a mental institute for most of his life, trying to figure out why people are the way they are. And from a very, very young age, he was aggressive in his pursuits of figuring out if there is a way to heal people. He tried healing people by giving them coke when he was only 15 or 16, only to realize it does remedy the illness for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 hours or days or weeks or months or years, but eventually the illness will come back. So it's, in as much as I think it's interesting to talk about Freud, I think if you were to look at your own life, I don't know if you have a boyfriend, but if you want to keep him, you got to be aggressive. There are lots of options out there. And again, you don't have to be mean-spirited. You know, you can be very gentle, very passive, but you vie for his attention. And it's actually quite good, because to some extent it means that you care for your future and you see a future out there, and you're willing to make some sacrifices, to be aggressive about it, especially about the things you care for. If you don't care for things, then there is no aggression involved. You cannot sit back like the Buddha and just say, okay, let this pass by, you know. But if you have hopes and dreams, if you have a future that you want to build your life on, you have no choice but to be aggressive. I mean, look at in a couple of weeks, you have to send out your application to UCs. Now, what are you going to do on the application? You're going to fib. You're going to make sure that your application has elements in it that other candidates don't. That's a form of aggression. You want to survive in this world, you got to be aggressive. Again, you can be passive, but you have to be aggressive nevertheless. What I think to some extent Freud was talking about is that The 19th, 20th century people are very different than the way we are. We kind of go nuts very quickly. We have a very, very short fuse. I don't know where you live, but usually there's a breaker box in the apartment or in the house in which you live. Go open the box, just the cover. And you have 10 amps, you have 20 amps, you have 40 amps, you have 50 amps. And so if you were to connect the 50 amp wire to the 10 amp breaker would just give. It would explode. It doesn't have the capacity to survive 50 amps of power going into it. So 21st century people, all of us in this class, we are like 5 amps. It doesn't take very much for us to explode. Part of it is cultural. I mean, a lot of it really is cultural. So in order for you to survive, and the way you have power, the way you have control is by being aggressive. Sometimes it just means that you go to the library and you do a lot of research, you acquire a good amount of information so you can combat with the things out there. If I make you feel bad, what are you going to do? You're going to go to my dean. If you fail a class, what are you going to do? You're going to repeat it and you're going to make sure that you're going to focus on this class a bit more than you did last time. You have no choice but to be aggressive in life if you want to survive. Freud's concept of aggression has to come with, first you have to wrestle with the forces of life, and life is mean. Life doesn't care for you at all. This morning when I left the house, my wife looks at me and says, "I love you." Nice thing to say to anyone. How long do you think she'll continue to remember me after my passing? 6 months? A year? 2 years? And then what? Well, then human nature kicks in. She'll get lonely. She'll get sad and depressed. What is she going to do with that? Write a book? No, she'll find a companion. Right? That's just the way things work. And so knowing all of this, what do? That's life. The other fact is you're still young. And so the elements of fragility, fatigue, old age, having lost the capacity to dream big, those things eventually will go away from you. Freud understood those things simply because he was getting older. He also knew that people are just mean. They don't really want to be mean, they just are mean. I mean, that's what happens when you have to survive. It's very much like the jungle. We are socialized. Our meanness is cloaked by compassion, by forgiveness, by kindness, by writing a book, by painting, by doing music, by going on dates, by having a boyfriend or a girlfriend or getting married. And then you tell your secrets to the closest people, and then they'll come back and bite you with the very things you gave them. Add to it the fact that you have to please people you don't really care for. You're a customer in this class. You ask questions, I'm bound to answer your questions in some shape or form. I don't really want to answer your question. I don't really want to be here. That's a system imposing itself upon me. What do? Well, I try to hide behind ideas, some eloquence perhaps. That's what life is. And so how do you deal with, and these are just pressures that are built inside you. The pressures of being in this class, the pressures of being alone, the pressures of having a boyfriend with whom you just had a fight, a disagreement with, the pressure of being dumped, the pressure of having a future that's uncertain, but you do the best you can to control what little power you have, to somehow guide your future in a direction that you enjoy. But ultimately life demands certain things, and you come to realize you're far too incompetent. And so how do you deal with all of this? Well, you drink it, you smoke it, you sex it, you paint it, you think it, you pray it. You can't live in a society that's overtly aggressive, because then everything would fall apart. You may not like me, but social etiquette demands that you raise your hand and ask your question in an eloquent, mature way. Just in case you ask your question the wrong way, I'll just kick you out. It's like that. So, a good amount of aggression is really hidden behind all the niceties. So, does that? No? Go ahead.
Also, it's weird that the pleasure that some people get from being aggressive or pressure on someone.
It's always nice to have power. In some ways, power makes other people needing you. Now, sometimes that power can be very useful, it can be beneficial to both parties. Sometimes it could be just useful to one and create a good amount of hostility and anger and frustration in the other. So it really depends on who's imposing their power. If you want to learn to play the piano, it's not a bad thing for your teacher to be mean once in a while, to spank you, to slap you, metaphorically speaking, to maybe scream at you, to reprimand you in some shape or form, so you could have some fear of him or her. So the next time the two of you meet, you practice like 15, 20 hours prior to the meeting. And that particular exercise of power is actually good for you because in 10 years' time, you'll be a great pianist. Okay. Sometimes you become like Don Juan. The kind of story that Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, would tell us is that you hang out with a lot of women or you hang out with a lot of men. And you do so because they gravitate towards you. Whether you're intellectually attractive, emotionally attractive, physically attractive, none of those things really matter. But the point is that you're the sun and they revolve around you. Okay. Now, it doesn't really mean that you, as the sun, have anything to offer anybody. It just means that for some strange reason, you happen to be a freak of nature. You just turn out to be a Brad Pitt or a Shah Rukh Khan or whatever. And people just enjoy being around you. But deep down, very much like Kierkegaard, you walk home alone because you are beastly. You're not digestible. You don't really like people at all. You like relevance. You like visibility. You like the meaning that they give you. But deep down, you're hollow. So, but more importantly, you're lonely and you're bored. And the only way you save yourself from boredom is you use your looks or your emotional, intellectual prowess to lure people into your trap. But these are stages you have to go through. Just think about another question. We'll come back in a minute. Elion? No? Kendra? So, there are a couple of things. Imagine you and I meet at a coffee shop. You know, I go there with my book, Allegory of the Cave. You go in there with your book, Allegory of the Light. If there is such a thing. And so the cave and the light, you know, gaze at each other and they like each other. One of the things is that I really have no access to how I'll be 5 years from now, and neither do you. But those things don't really concern me or you. All I know is that I look at you and emotionally I'm aroused. Something about me says, Kendra is attractive. And maybe you'll feel the same way. Now, as I begin to have less focus on my reading and more focus on you and more focus on the imaginations of you, eventually I say, okay, maybe I should just, pack my things up and walk past by her, trip, accidentally, spill my coffee on her, and say hello and see where it goes. And I suppose I'm investing in a future relationship, but about 80-90% of it really is unknown. All I know is that what is in my hand, which is, I like you. What experiences I will have 5 years from now, I don't really know, or 2 months from now, I don't know. What my intentions are, that remains hidden as well. Am I moving into this relationship because I'm sufficient? Am I moving because I'm insufficient? Am I moving into it because I'm bored? None of those things are accessible to me, really. And I'm no Sigmund Freud. And I'm not Gurdjieff or Auspinski. I'm some regular chap with a good amount of mysteries about me, and I don't really care to know the mysteries, or I'm not interested. But all I know is that I like you, and I'm willing to invest. And if you kind of reflect about human nature, if you have studied a little bit Plato, Auspinski, all these different branches of knowledge, you might come to realize that human beings are just born to be bankrupt, and they're born to live in bankruptcy. And eventually regret near the end of their life is an indication that they reviewed their life and they realize that too has been bankrupt. It's very, very rare to find very many human beings out there who can kind of look at their life and say, wow, this has been a life worth living. Maybe the last breath that you take before you, go to your maker, if there is such a thing. Maybe you'll find peace then. So, given the fact that I have no idea what my intentions are, all I know is that I'm in the grips of attraction and maybe some other kinds of appetites, you and I will get involved. There's a huge factor in all of human life, which is boredom. Initially, because you lack the experience, you lack that experience saturating you completely. Hopes and dreams continue to guide you. There are positive forces. I keep calling you, texting you, buying you flowers, all sorts of things. Until I have power over you, or I have power over this relationship, which means that you're my girlfriend and I'm your boyfriend. That's a good amount of power. And as we move in together, as you and I spend more and more time together, you are less mysterious to me. You become more familiar. I get to know your habits. I need to know what lines I can cross, what lines I can cross. When your monthly cycle is going to be, when I need to just walk away just because you're going through some hormonal changes. So I get to have all of those information. And little by little, and I have my own issues, and all of a sudden, love, if that ever existed in our relationship, becomes something familiar. I'm saturated. It's no longer love. We're just in the habit of saying good morning, I love you, see you in a few hours. And then the struggle begins, which is I look at you, desperately try to find some sort of a thing to talk about that has meaning, depth. And in the end, they both resort to watching a movie or going for a walk or maybe buying a dog. Who the hell knows? Okay. Now, what is it that human beings desire at their very core? I want to feel that I'm alive. I mean, I don't know if you enjoy reading books or you enjoy hanging out with some of your friends. There are moments where you sit and you say, I want to find a book that will inspire me. I want to watch a movie that will bring me to life. I want to have a conversation that's meaningful, that has depth, And God forbid, if you've had experiences, like you've read a book that gave you wings, and as life passes, life clips your wings, and you're desperately wanting to bring that memory back to life. And you make all these attempts, you know. So deep down, all of us in this class have no choice but to walk into life with a good amount of hopes and dreams, have wings, we fly to the sun, we fall in love with whatever, and that particular emotion lives in time. Time begins to rust things, oxidizes things. Whatever feelings and emotions you had that were very intense slowly become dim. And then you fall back down and you get, lost in the routines of life. And there is nothing wrong with that because it's good to be in the routines of life. Habits are good because future is predictable now. You know that when you go home, you don't have to deal with being alone. You don't have to deal with eating food by yourself. There is someone there waiting for you, even though it may be completely meaningless. Okay. One of the things my grandmother had said repeatedly when my grandfather had died, and he died such a nice way. He just put his head down and never woke up. He was 60. Was that when I come home, even though they never spoke, and whenever they spoke, they would fight. He says, I just want to come home and I want something alive. And we're not a pet culture, so we don't really go out there to buy cats and dogs and rats. So she said, I just told your uncle, Muhammad, to go and buy me a couple of plants so I could water them once in a while, those things. So you try to get yourself out of boredom, right? Now, you and I have been invested in one another for a number of years. Are you not waiting to come to life? Absolutely. Will you flirt with someone? It's very healthy. Do we have the cultural narrative that says flirting is okay, especially if you're in a relationship? The answer is no. Does flirting come with guilt? Yeah. Is that a pressure that you have to carry? Yeah. And how do you get rid of it? Well, you delete the number. And out of mind, hopefully out of sight, hopefully out of mind. Okay. Is there someone out there who could all of a sudden give you your wings back or at least remind you? Yeah. Is it a book? No, that's too tough. Is it a movie that can inspire you? Yeah, but that's short-lived. Could it be a human being? The easiest path, yes. Are you going to look for Jesus Christ? No, he's far too demanding. So what's going to happen to my investment, or even your investment in this relationship? Up in the air. Now add to it the fact that this is not a shame culture, it's not a religious culture, it's not a philosophical culture, it's not a family-oriented culture, where just in case you cross lines, you have all these people attacking you like dogs, reminding you that you strayed, you need to go back to the roots. None of those things are in place. Short answer to your question, even though I've forgotten your question completely, is no one is safe, nothing is safe. There's a good amount of unknown elements in the future that can enter your life. You should count yourself very lucky that you don't live in Palestine. You should consider yourself very lucky that where you live in a gated community, where you have security passing by your apartment or your house every 10 minutes. You should consider yourself very lucky that Oakland, at least, is no longer the number one city on top of the crime list in America. That you can sit here very comfortably, knowing full well that the door is not going to open and some guy who's completely nuts does something unthinkable. So, and that's where power and control come in. You try as much as you can to have resources. Those resources will give you power. That power gives you control. Without power and control, you cannot predict how your future is going to unfold. Are there going to be unpredictable elements entering your life and turning your life upside down? Absolutely. Are you going to be ready for it? No. A lot of people, assume that getting married is fun. Having children is even funner. As assumptions and theories go, they're great. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian. As theories go, they're wonderful. They're wonderful labels to have. But once you actually get into the game, you realize this is no longer a dream. I mean, it's a reality that's going to slap you every single day, 24/7. It's relentless. You know. And sometimes there is nothing wrong with being slapped. I mean, that's another kind of investment, and hopefully you can pass on your insight or wisdom to other people. But given the sort of animals that we are, we do our best to make sure that, you know, unpredictable things don't enter our lives. And if they do, we try to be very cautious, if we can. And just in case we fall, try to remain with the memory very privately. So, Quinn?
Do you think people know who they are? Ideas?
You have to forgive me. When people talk or ask questions, only a few keywords stand out, and then I don't even listen to the rest. I can't. So my apologies if I've missed like 90% of your question. I don't know if there is anything written on you the moment of your birth. What I do know for sure is that people come out with different temperaments. They're just wired differently. Okay? That's all that I know. The rest really has to do with how you've been socialized. I was in my office today. I got tired of writing, so I brought down a notepad and I began to write some Persian poetry. So what you have is a blank sheet of paper. It has nothing on it. And it can be picked up by anyone. And the pen could be picked up by anyone. And whatever lives inside that someone could ultimately be transferred onto this piece of paper. In my case, it was the poem I gave to Connor. You know. I think this idea of knowing yourself, first you have some intimations, some intuitions. Like you go to your mom when you're 5 or 6 or 7, you say some profound things, and your mom is kind of, sits back and says, wow, where did that come from? But you can't really say that's knowing. Okay. It's like a dream. Something happens to you. You say things that you don't really have much knowledge of, but they sound really, 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 really good. So what happens is, I think, is that you get lost in the business of life, and at a certain point, there's a disturbance of sorts, where your plans are not panning out the way you want them to. And then, depending on the sort of student that you are, how curious you are, how passionate you are, how much you care about understanding. Because understanding goes through all these different stages. First, it's emotional. You feel something. You don't really know what lives inside the feelings, but you just have these feelings that something about it is just not right. And then you go on this quest to kind of gain some information. And so what you have is a good amount of information, and then you have a good amount of knowledge or information, okay? And then you add the feelings or emotions and the information together, and what you get is a series of assumptions. And these assumptions will eventually become your belief system, who you think you are, what you are, and all that. Like you're nice, you're compassionate, you're generous, you're all this. And then comes the real life, where you go out with someone, and now you're boyfriend and girlfriends, okay? Now you can no longer live behind theories, okay? And now life tests you. And all these layers of emotions, all these layers of information are slowly removed. And the aggression that's always lived inside all of us, it comes out. And then just in case your boyfriend says, I'm leaving you because you suck as a human being, if you're at a place where you say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to read a lot of books, go into my psychological cave or go to a therapist's office and figure out who and what I am. And what usually happens is you travel back in time. And for the first time now, you become an earnest student of yourself. You begin to care for yourself. Were there any breaking points at the age of 5 or 6 or 10 or 20? And the reason why I say going back to 5 or 6, because that's just the way this culture works, okay? And that's the way everywhere works now, even Iran. So just because I say Americans, don't just think I'm talking about the people here. My own people back home, they suffer from the same stuff, okay? And then you begin to kind of, and it's not like you begin to understand something that's noble and decent about you. You begin to understand the flaws, because the flaws are the things that are creating some disturbances. You try to understand them. Then, if you have the proper tools, tame them. You can never get rid of them, but you can tame them. So, yeah. And I suppose if you get to a certain place where you don't really care about getting to know the physical aspect of life, the social, political aspect of your life, your health issues perhaps, and if you no longer care about the emotional elements inside you, emotions caused by social and political components, by health components, by the relationship with your parents, you know. And if you're no longer curious about Plato or Malcolm X or the social political aspect of life, you've kind of been there, you've done that. You know, it's kind of like you get married, it's wonderful, you have children, wonderful, and all of a sudden, for some strange reason, at the age of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, you sit back and you say, okay, you know, I've had the house, I've had the money, I've had the job, I've had the husband and the wife, the kids. Is that it? And if you find yourself at a place of dissatisfaction, depending again on your power, resources, you could either move to India, find yourself a teacher who can help you understand a different part of yourself, or you could pray for death since you have no resources, or you can just continue life the way it's been going for the past 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. If I was to use the fourth way, or Gurdjieff-Auspinski school, in regards to knowing oneself, I would say the following. There is the outer life of Quinn, all the things you have done for the past like 20 years of your life. That's the outer part. And it's good to know them, because you live 99.9% of who and what you are lives in that world. Then there is this 1% where Quinn is not her past. Quinn is, as Plato would say, lived a long time ago in the world of ideas, pure, uncontaminated. And one of the reasons why perhaps boredom sets into human life is to remind them that, you know, as you find the Gospels, don't store your treasures down here because thieves and robbers will eventually, you know, steal them. That you wake up from a nap, you look at your life, everything is great, but all of a sudden you say, well, fine, but really did I spend all of my life for this and it means nothing? Now, if that particular feeling stays with you for 5, 6 hours, and then there's a chance that your life may turn upside down. If on the other hand, you're like me, you wake up in a bad mood for like 10 minutes and then you start washing dishes and the mood goes away and you start dancing, well, that's very lucky for you. So Gurdjieff had this beautiful ability to not only force you to examine your outer life, which he labeled as the personality, but he also invited you to try to explore this part of you, which he calls the essence, that has nothing to do with your personality. But to get to the essence, in other words, if, and forgive me for making it this way, sometimes you fall in love with someone through their bodies. Okay? Like, you can go out with some guy, you can have a great time, but the moment you guys have sex, the two physical bodies intertwine, all of a sudden, without you knowing, you spit out, I love you. Okay? So sometimes what Gurdjieff used to do was to use someone's physical history to tap into the eternal, if you want to call it that. Cadence. Cadence, right?
Why does like being physically intimate with someone speed up that process?
There is just something about our chemistry. Something explodes. I don't know too much about that. The only thing I can say in that regards is the following. You should just better hope that whatever this explosion is, how it comes about, is being caused by being with the right person. Sometimes you have sex just to gain some pleasure, to be gratified, and, take a shower and walk away. Sometimes you have sex with someone because emotionally they do something for you. Like they bring you to life in some shape or form. But that also has, its own different stages and levels. It's rarely intellectual. I love Anthony Hopkins. And imagine if he had long hair, he was a woman, Antonia Hopkins. His age, I wouldn't be that attracted to him. Sophia Loren, maybe. But all the plastic surgery, maybe not. I take that back. There is something you can love and then have sex, which is profoundly magical. You can have sex and then fall in love. And these are very, very, very different. It reminds me of a story of, I think we talked about the story last week. Or maybe not. There's a book called the Urantia book. It's about 2,000 pages. It's about the life of Jesus. He had a wife, many kids. One of the ways that the book describes his relationship to his wife was that this woman was walking and he sees the kingdom of God within Jesus. How she sees it, I don't really know. People way back then were kind of nuts anyways. So she falls in love with the Jesus, the kingdom of God first. Whenever you become attracted to anything, and when that attraction kind of grows bigger and bigger and bigger, it needs to be housed in a physical container. It's kind of like you have this emotion called anger. Eventually you go to a boxing ring and you punch someone, or you scream it, or you drive really fast, or you break a plate. In other words, any emotion that has a good amount of intensity in it, it needs to take a physical form. If you love someone, eventually it needs to come through with sex. And there is nothing wrong with it. Okay? The wrongness of a certain behavior, action, is an afterthought. It comes much later in the background of your own life. Okay? There is a guy, J.G. Bennett. He was one of the disciples of, or students of Gurdjieff. He was married like 8 times. His 8th wife happened a week after his 7th wife died. There was no guilt in him. He was a little older. He had understood human nature relatively well. He was a good student of life. And he knew that being alone is counterproductive. What's the use of you desperately wanting to write something inspiring, and you are writing, but you've also fasted, or maybe you haven't eaten for a while, or maybe you haven't peed, or maybe you haven't had sex, whatever the case may be. But there is this intense emotion boiling up inside you. Well, get rid of it, and then go back to your writing. Release the tension. I think the sort of eruption of emotions that you're talking about, usually the way it happens is you look at someone, at a certain point fantasies begin to appear, then you invest in those fantasies by thinking about them, fantasizing about them. Eventually they take shape in a form of a text or a phone call or a coffee date, then that lures you more into the trap. At a certain point, you long to have your knees touch. You long to have your shoulders touch. You long to have his hand or him holding your hand. And then you fantasize about the kiss, and then so on and so forth. But there is a background, which is you have already found yourself emotionally and physically attracted to this person. This sex just puts a stamp on it. It also depends on how you love someone. That also determines the quality and the nature of love and the way it impacts you. But is that, Arvi, is it? No? No? It's okay. Unfortunately, we do. It's very sad, yeah. Carmen? Alexis? No? Quinn?
I do have a question. How come it's so hard for people to admit to themselves?
In a simple way, it's because you give a shit. In giving a shit or giving a care about anything, really, there is a world of assumptions. You assume you're a Christian. You assume you understand the Bible. You assume that just because you went to school and you have your PhD in philosophy, you're a philosopher. You assume that just because you've been in a classroom teaching for 30 years, you're a good instructor. We just make all these assumptions. There's also one of the 7 deadly sins called pride. Is it wrong the moment you're born to scream because you want your mom to nurse you, even though she's been carrying you for the past 9 months, and she hasn't slept for the last 6 months, and she hasn't been comfortable for the last 10 months? You don't care. You scream because you want to be taken care of. Why? Because it's you. You're only an infant, but it's you. And what makes pride continue is sloth. You're just lazy. It's painful to be reflective. It's not worth it. And just in case someone questions you, examines you the way Socrates used to some 3,000 years ago, well, wrath comes in. You get angry. I mean, an eye for an eye, in some ways, is, the Mosaic law. It's a great law, by the way, because you kind of understand that human beings don't learn. Fear is really, really good. Control is really, really good. Power is really, really good. Control is good. And if you leave people to their own, they're going to just make everything go bad. I mean, look at America. Beautiful country. Individuality, self-entitlement, it's just crap. Everybody does what they want. And in the end, you have 60% depression rate and suicide on the rise. But all those things aside, you also have gluttony. You have greed. You like when people look at you. You like when people ask you questions. You like when, whatever the case may be. I mean, we like who and what we are. And just in case someone has something that you lust after, you envy them. And just in case, that was 7. And just in case you can't get what they have, you go to your Facebook page and you write all these nasty things about them. That's how you express your wrath. Why? Because it's you. It's your ego. See what happens when you go to Yale? You no longer have any questions. Kendra? Just drop them from your class. Don't look at them. Read their essays very, very closely. Make sure it's not AI generated, which is a common practice these days. Well, we go back to Carmen's. I don't know if you asked that question or not, but if you have a neighbor who doesn't like you, the way you do business, doesn't like your kids, if they hate you, and one of the things about hate is that it has a good potential to turn into violence, okay? If you have the resources, if you have the power, you pack up your stuff and you move. If, on the other hand, you don't have the funds to move, and he or she is much bigger than you are, and they have more power than you, an eye for an eye is not going to work out too well for you. So you have to become passive. So what you do is you begin to read the Bible. Not the Old Testament, though, just the New Testament. But only those passages where it says, forgive, for they know not what they do. Turn the other cheek. What can you do with a neighbor who is like Mike Tyson at the age of 20? You can't do much. If, on the other hand, you had power and you had no fear, then an eye for an eye would work. If someone hates you, the question is, do you have power to overcome it? If you happen to be Marcus Aurelius, it would say, listen, life is going to throw at you all sorts of awful things. You can't just wrestle with life all the time. The only thing you can have power over is your own emotions. If something bothers you, well, be as cunning as Aesop and his fable of the fox. You can't reach the grapes. Why be angry? Just say the grapes are sour. You can't change someone's mind because they happen to be racist. Well, just say they're racist. I'm just going to move away. And hopefully God will educate them, because I can't. I think one of the reasons why we do desire power, and one of the nice things about pride, is that an ambition and lust and greed and envy, if you use them in the right way. I mean, Karl Marx, what can he do? Nothing. He's an incompetent human being. But what makes him powerful is his ability to observe. And then his observations create feelings. See, I observe a lot of things, but none of my observations generate feelings. So it just remains an observation. So when I come to class, I just talk about it. For Marx, he saw things and it pained him. But he had another resource, which was he was able to think. He was really able to think. Not just think about his feeling, but also think about why people suffer so much. Why people are exploited so often. But he had another ability. I mean, he wasn't like an Elon Musk. He didn't have any money. The power of observation, the power of feeling, the power of thinking. He also had the luxury of time and youth. He sat and he had passion and he wrote. That's how he got rid of his aggression. You sit and you write. And you write about your observations. And what exactly is it that you observe? Powerful people, they're only there to make themselves more powerful. Trump doesn't really like you. He just wants your vote. And once he has it, then you'll be deported. That's how it is. And wrongly, of course, from Marx, he had come to the conclusion that it's the rich and the powerful, it's the capitalist, it's money that corrupts. Because people are innately good and noble, which is not true. And it's not true because all you have to do is just have a kid and just wait, just to see how this kid behaves. There is nothing noble about this kid. The kid is like a capitalist. Only through punishment and reprimand and socialization can the kid become tamed. One of the nice things about going to school is that you're bored. Who cares? Pretend as if you're having fun. You're angry. Well, express your anger and you'll be expelled from the class. You'll get an F. Because it's a good beginning, because you're going to enter the world and you're not going to like your job. Sometimes you won't even like your companion. And if you were to express it the wrong way, you'll be alone. You'll be in one of those like old nursing homes. You want that? No. So I have no idea what your question was. Alexis?
You mentioned people like Mike Tyson and their lives and their books. You mentioned something like ones or
I'm sorry, much later in life. If you look at the life of Mike Tyson right now, he's like Marcus Aurelius. He dominated all the lands. Mike Tyson did. As you get a little older, testosterone kind of diminishes, melatonin increases, you become a bit more mellow. Instead of fighting someone physically, you fight them intellectually. Now he goes, on podcasts and he talks, and he says some really, really, really nice things that even Jesus couldn't say. He's a really wise man now. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to point that out. Yeah. I mean, he kills a lot of people. Then near the end of his life, he said, "Let me sit and write this down. It's really bad to kill people. It's really bad to dominate them."
He never wanted to do that.
Yeah, well, that's what he said. Yeah.
aside from time, what else am I supposed to for time? So
I have never drank, nor have I ever smoked. But we had a car wash in Roseville. Across the street was the AA center. And we had regular customers, and we became friends in the sense that they would come over while we were washing their cars. They would talk to us for hours. And the common theme amongst those good people was that my father hit me. I hated my father. The only resource I had, the only power that I had was to drink. And eventually it became a habit. Or life got tough, or I lost my job, or I got depressed, or I was a social drinker, then one glass became 2, then 3, then 4, then I realized I'm drinking every day like 50 bottles. Now, and we're not talking about, say, those people who were frequent in the 1920s and 30s, which you call workable or functional alcoholics, like Dick Van Dyke. He's 94, 95 now. Maybe he's dead, I don't know. But they used to drink heavily, but they also used to be very, very functional. So what usually happens with all the pressures of life and all the negative emotions that are built up inside us, you don't want to scream, you don't want to yell, you don't want to hit anybody, so you try to drink them away. And you're successful to some extent. And should anyone label you as a drunk, you're going to fight back. Because no one desires to be labeled negatively. Okay? And none of us in this class would ever enjoy losing control over anything. Some people, because of their past, the moment they realize they're falling in love, deeply in love, they run away. It's too much. It's not something that they have the capacity to carry. It's a huge cross for them, So instead of investing in it, time passes and it becomes casual. Okay? And so, since none of us in this class enjoy being negatively labeled, and since none of us in this class enjoy losing control over anything, we'll make all sorts of ridiculous assumptions about ourselves. I'm a social drinker. I only drink like once or twice a week, And just in case you have a disagreement with your wife, when you do something, behave like ridiculously infantile way, and someone pushed that in your face, you try to blame the other person. Well, you said this to me, that's why A, B, C, D happened. And then your wife leaves you. And then you say, well, I never really liked her. So what? The point I suppose I'm trying to make is, first, you'll make a lot of excuses, and you will justify those excuses. Then you will suffer a good amount of loss, whether it's health issues or people in your life that will leave you because you just become far too nasty. Maybe you've lost your job, whatever the case may be. After a good amount of loss, you realize you have no control over anything anymore. And when you want to be around people, they don't really want to be around you. And you find yourself in isolation, and that's not fun. And you try to find a way to overcome isolation, loneliness, depression, sadness, a good amount of anger, but you have no power over any of them. And there is a saint in the Christian tradition, Saint John of the Cross. He wrote this book, The Dark Night of the Soul. Imagine that you go home, it's late at night, and the power is out. There isn't anything you can see. And your house happens to be cluttered, so you don't really know where to go because you banged up your knees, you banged up your head against this and that, and you're just bleeding. And it's really, really frightening. You know, when you're in the dark night, in other words, when you come to realize that there is no one in your life and you've lost everything that has been of value, you sit in this darkness. Now, there is no quick fix to this. A lot of people may come and help you, but you have lost your ability to trust, to love, to have faith. Your self-confidence really has just been shot. And someone, if not inwardly, someone from the outside needs to come down and care for you enough to kind of just drag you. And for anyone to care that much for you, they must have spent a good amount of time with you, that they're willing to sacrifice their own life, their own time, their own youth, their own energy to walk into your life and fix the mess. This day and age, I don't know if that's possible, but let's just say it is. And what's going to happen is, now all you can do at this point is lament. You're going to talk about all the awful things you've done. You're not ready to be helped. You're not there to be saved. You don't have the capacity. And then time passes, and I don't know how this happens. Everybody works on a different timetable. At a certain point, someone walks into your life perhaps, or maybe there's an opening in your own psychology, and your hand reaches up. Remember what pride is. Pride is this element that forces you to abstain from seeking help from the outside. You can do it on your own. You know? You have to get to a place where you realize you're completely, absolutely helpless. And that's a devastating place to be. And if someone is able or willing to walk into your life and pull you up, and sometimes you don't want to be pulled up because you become addicted to depression. It's chronic now. And there's a good amount of harshness to it, dragging you up. And eventually, if you're lucky, you know, they'll baptize you in some shape or form. You'll go to the AA center and you'll overcome your pride. And pride actually takes a different shape now. It has a different color. You stand up and say, for the first time, and you're very proud that you can actually come out and say, my name is Amir Sabzvari and I'm an alcoholic. There is no shame, there is no guilt. There is this beautiful understanding that you really fucked up. And you want to recover and you need help. So, yeah.
Favorite
You work so hard for like 5 days. Then people come and they eat and they mess up your house and you're exhausted and the food even doesn't taste good. And you sit back and you say, I'm never going to do this again. And then you do it. It's just like a bad relationship. It's always good to eat, even if it's poison, when you're amongst friends and family, especially if you like them. My father's 90, his days are numbered. So it's always good to see him. So, I can't really eat anything these days. Oh, no dessert. That's it. It's finished for me. All desserts have butter, and I can't do butter. My wife had tiramisu the other day, and she said, "Kiss me." I said, "No, you just had butter. I can't kiss you." I said, "Can you have like tiramisu every single day, 24/7?" She said, "Why?" I said, "I really don't want to kiss you. That's my favorite dish." You'll get that. Don't worry. What's yours?
Or banana pudding.
A what?
Mac and cheese or banana pudding.
If you ever go to Roseville or Sacramento, there is a Chinese restaurant. It's called Fats. They have banana cream pie. You should taste it. It's about $40, the whole pie, but it's so good. But, you're young, you're healthy, just make sure you exercise afterwards. Well, what time is it?
It's
25?
45.
Oh,
I'm good.
I think so. It's good to see you guys.
Have a wonderful day.
You too, Connor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.